I'm John Kaiser, conducting a backstage interview at the September Virtual Metals Investor Forum. Today, I am conducting the interview with James Buskard of Nevada Exploration Inc. James, welcome to Backstage Interview.
Hello, John. Thank you for having us.
Nevada Exploration Inc. started drilling hole 12 in March and finally reported assays 6 months later. In 2018-19, you undertook a 10-hole core drilling program, which only took 1 year to complete and report all the results of. Why did this hole take so long? And is this what we can expect going forward? Assays for a single deep hole every 6 months.
Yeah, it's a question we're getting quite a bit over the last few days, and it's a good one. For the first thing is these holes are deeper. We just drilled hole 12, which was pretty darn close to a mile in depth, and we began the hole in March, and we concluded the hole at the end of May. And I think there's a little bit of I don't know, confusion around what happens with a box of core after it gets picked up from the drill rig and brought back to the office, and you drop it off at the lab, and 8 weeks later you have assays. Well, and it's up to us to sort of explain the process. And really, what happens when you get a mile of core is it's got to get washed and photographed a couple different ways, different types of light, ultimately logged, a preliminary log. Then it gets XRF for preliminary geochemistry. It gets cut, then it gets sampled, and then ultimately these samples get dropped off. And that process it's not fast. That's a matter of weeks, at which point labs are 8 to 10 weeks, fine. And once you get your assays back, you then go back and revisit your logging to see, did your picks line up with geochem changes? You just refine your model and make sure that everything hangs together before uploading it and updating your model. And that's about a 15-week sort of timeline. And from when we finished drilling to when we announced results, it was about 15 weeks. So, I mean, that's normal. What's not normal is stopping the program after a single drill hole. And because what it does is it breaks the momentum, if you will. While we don't have 100 feet of core working its way through the office every day, so to speak, because that's about what you would expect these core holes to be drilled at, 100 feet a day. And you'd like to think you could mostly keep up with that in terms of your logging facility. You design your logging facility based on how much core is coming out of the ground every day. So once you're in the flow, if you're doing a 10-hole program and you're in the flow, well, your assays start rolling in about the same speed that you conclude drill holes. So we had never expected, and most of our peers don't publish drill assays after every single hole, and that wasn't really our expectation at the beginning of the program. But certainly with this big delay, we felt we had to, obviously. So moving forward, no, I do not expect that we're going to be looking at a hole every 6 months, but that's really dependent on us coming up with a sustainable drilling contractor drilling situation on the ground where we're drilling our 100 feet a day. So once we get this program going, we expect that the continuity of news flow is going to be much faster. This stop and drilling was really a killer in terms of our momentum.
Now, you spent about, I think, $6 million on South Grass Valley. I was amazed in 2018 when you confirmed that this patch of gravel north of a barren, unaltered lower plate window was actually a Carlin fluid pumped lower plate window at the bedrock interface with the gravel. And there was a lot of hopes that you would find gold and then start delineating a new discovery. But the best gold that you got in either the RC or core holes was a spike to 50 ppb in some local little fracture. So, but you did get all the other Carlin pathfinders. So the question people are asking is this system fertile with gold, or was it fertile and perhaps lost the gold payload much deeper beyond the reach of any drill holes? Or the Cambrian limey mudstone, is it an effective sponge. Maybe the gold just blew through along with the pathfinders and never really hung up anywhere. But hole number 12 gave us something different. We had about 150-meter interval of Cambrian limey mudstone where your gold went up to 80 ppb and tracked the highest arsenic values you have seen so far. And my question to you is, what has that hole told you about the fertility of this system and the prospect that eventually you will find within reach of drills where the gold piled up?
What you just worked through is exactly the order of the questions that we have to answer as we de-risk this thing. And as you said, beginning with the first few holes, whether we look at the trace element geochemistry or the oxygen isotopes or everything we look at to map the size of the system, exactly, we were able to establish we've got this massive crown system under the gravels. And what that led us to is the next logical question, which is, was there a particular set of features that could focus these fluids such that we could have a strategy to find places where they were able to pile up? And that was really what our second phase of drilling was able to tell us, that this one particular unit, the CLM unit, was very important in terms of focusing the fluids through the district. Now, what hole 12 is the first hole of this next phase of drilling, which is, just as you said, were there places where these fluids could have had an opportunity to build up economic grades? And that does relate back to your question about fertility. And the answer is yes. As we look at the gold values, the 80 ppbs, the 100 ppbs, we do have these gold kicks through the system. The fertility question has been answered. What's not been answered is where these fluids are always dilute to begin with. The question we answer is, did they have an opportunity to concentrate? And that really leads directly to what's the most pressing next question is really structural. I mean, we've said we can predict the geology. We're doing it. We said that we can predict where the fluids are flowing, where the trace elements are going to be moving through. We've done it. Now we need to show that we can predict where they had a chance to concentrate, and that's really going to be some of the very important features that are going to be structural. What sort of folding features are there? What sort of thrust features? Perhaps these thrusts provide some repetition where we get an aquiclude sitting, a cap, if you will, above our favorable unit. It's these structural questions that are really going to drive trying to find these intersections of, we've got the pregnant fluids, we got the right sponge, where are we going to find places where they intersect? And that's going to be structural. So hole 12 helped absolutely in terms of validating the model, validating the fertility. But as we continue to finish these first few holes of this current program, pardon me, it's really the structural features that are now really important. I mean, it was a driving reason why we drilled this first hole 12 through the Water Canyon structural corridor, was trying to build up the structural pieces to overlay the geology, the alteration, the trace elements. It's those intersections that will define where the gold has an opportunity to concentrate.
Now, hole 12 was a step out beyond your existing core grid to the northeast, where the bedrock gets deeper, where your gold and groundwater values become very weak, if not blank. Hole 13, which is now stuck in the gravels waiting for a driller, is at the southern end, right where the layer cake drapes over the Grass Valley intrusion, which plunges into your Water Canyon corridor. I love that you've confirmed that this is the gateway for the fluids coming up. I love this idea of your layer cake dipping into it. Hole 13 seems to me to be like the ideal hole to drill to seek where that Cambrian limey mudstone dips into the Water Canyon corridor. But why did you drill this risky number 12 hole first instead of number 13? And what happened to number 11? Why this jump from 10 to 12 in the core hole numbering sequence?
I'm going to answer that one first. 10 was abandoned. 11 and 10 are the same. 10 was abandoned. We stepped off and we drilled 11 to the same location. So there was no skipping. And hole 11 was at the north end of the project. And it was up until hole 12, the deepest hole of the project. I'm going to switch over to my model here for a second. I brought it up. This is the same model I showed in the talk the other day, and it's the same model that's published online for everyone to see. So this is something everybody can navigate to. But if we look at the model here, and we look at where the Grass Valley stock here intersects with our target here, and if we turn on the major alteration features here from our what we know about the previous drilling, and let's turn on our previous drill holes here. And turn off our target just for a minute here. What we know for this target is that the intensity of the alteration features is focused down the middle. As we get to the north here, it starts to get broader and broader, versus where we get back to closer to the intrusive here, and these features line up more and more focused. Now, if we look at what we know about the three major camps, what we know is as you get closer to the intrusive, the rheology contrast, the rocks close to the intrusive break as these structures continue to move, and it increases the porosity. But what we see is that lends itself to a more structurally focused mineralization, which doesn't generally have as big of a lateral footprint. The trace elements, everything's more focused in these structures. So yes, up against the intrusive, sometimes the highest grades, but also tightest footprint. Whereas this, as you transition along the corridor and you get further away from the intrusive, what we're seeing with the alteration features, the fluid becomes less fracture controlled and more controlled by the CLM unit. And so the feature gets bigger. So you actually have an opportunity, it's an easier place to get a, points on the board, if you will, a hole through your model. The model's going to, the system's going to be bigger there. It's also closest to where we had hole 11, which was up until then the deepest hole in the project. It was also in a place that was immediately on the road. So here in March, we were able to get an easy drill hole in a place where we're most likely to see the broadest footprint, get an early success, if you will, in terms of confirming the model. And with that, visually, we already knew we were heading in the right direction. We, very comfortable now moving to the southern end of the project, which is, as you said, very important up against the intrusive. Likely going to be a smaller lateral footprint, but we're also getting to a point where the structural core is squeezing against the intrusive, so our sort of east-west range is getting smaller. So they're both excellent places to get a hole. I wouldn't say one's better than the other. And they, we've got to get all these holes down.
So in other words, the chance of finding a gold rush type mineralized zone was better at the northern end, whereas here at the southern end near the intrusion, it's more like the really high grade 4 mile zone that's north of Gold Rush that Barrick came up with 2 million ounces with 1,500 meter deep holes. Now this
John, I would say no. The southern area is lends itself more to something more vertical, because as these fluids and as these package of rocks hits the intrusive, there's nowhere to go but up. And as we see in the drill hole, the major breccia features we're seeing, there's a lot of evidence for vertical. So I would suggest that the geometry, if you will, would be more Cortez Hills at the south than 4 Mile.
Like the breccia pipe.
You got it.
Okay. You started hole 13 on May 27th, and on July 7th, you told us the hole is stopped at 577 meter depth in gravel, apparently close to the bedrock surface. And the reason it stopped is because the drillers took a hike, and you have been unable, or the company has been unable to find a replacement crew with the competence to drill these very expensive, difficult, deep holes. Is this a Nevada-wide problem? Why is this a problem? What does it take to fix it?
Yeah, it goes beyond Nevada, but we're talking about Nevada here, and there are rigs parked throughout Nevada. Even on Nevada Gold Mines projects, there's rigs parked for lack of crews, qualified crews. Through the global financial crisis, the pool of drillers shrunk. And today what we're left with is a huge demand at this moment for qualified drillers. There's a lot of folks that were helpers that have now been promoted to drillers, which is fine. It's just that career trajectory. You usually begin on 400 to 600 foot holes and start layering in your experience over years and years. And what we're faced with is a absolute shortage of qualified people that have the experience to drill these really deep holes. And the costs of drilling, if you're trying to target something at 4,000 feet and you drill a 3,000 foot hole and have to abandon it, that's infinitely expensive in terms of the information provided per dollar. And so we are absolutely not willing to risk, take that sort of execution risk on, given, we're not a barrack. We can't just afford to let, the move over and do it again and foot the costs of not getting these holes down. So we've had opportunities to get rigs. We could have continued with the rig we had, but the likelihood that the crews that were available were going to get these holes to our target depth, we didn't deem to be a good, it was too risky. And so we've been very picky. It's not just us. We've lots of peers in the same boat. That being said, I believe we're close. We have a couple groups here that do have both the near-term availability of rigs and the near-term availability of people that can get the holes down, because they've got the holes down up at 4 Mile, similarly deep holes, similarly challenging drilling conditions. So I think we're there, but we've been reluctant to put a particular start date on it we just don't want to make any commitments until we're absolutely clear that we can achieve them.
Now, in your last press release, you revealed that after the August 31st renewal deadline, you expanded the South Grass Valley land position by about 20%. Last year, you conducted a property-wide RC drill program, but you did not expand your land position after the August 31st deadline. What did hole 12 change in your understanding about how big your land footprint should be?
Yeah, so I'm going to switch back to looking at the model here for a second. Turn off these layers. So hole 12 is sitting here at the north end of the project. Here we are. And hole 11 was this similarly deep hole here, where we had a lot of the same things that we're seeing. And these features are, both these holes are intersected. The intensity of the features, the thickness of these features, the scale, are such that we know we're not at the edge of the system. This system doesn't just end where our drill holes end here. We have every indication that this system continues northwest along our structural corridor. This is the biggest new Carlin-type mineral system that's been discovered outside of a mine fence in the last few decades. This is a very important project. We are not looking for any neighbors. And given that we know this system just simply doesn't end here, we see opportunities to make multiple discoveries in this new district. So we're just doing what we need to make sure our shareholders get to participate in the upside of everything that we're discovering here.
Now, when you drilled that hole 12, you drilled it from the east towards the west to cut through the Water Canyon corridor to get into the dipping layer cake, and you found some very interesting, confusing rock geology on the other side. Have you been able to figure out what's going on to the east of the Water Canyon corridor?
Yeah, if we take a look at this now, looking back to the south, as you said, this hole 12 here, while it reached our target, which is terrific, we also encountered a lot of complexity in terms of fold features, some fault features, how the stratigraphy, some evidence of missing units in the package, which suggestive of thrusting. There's a lot of structural complexity in this part of the model here that we're working on right now. And as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, having got a good handle on the geology, a good handle on what's controlling the alteration and trace element flow, it's really pegging these structural architecture we're going to be able to lay over this thing that's going to allow us to prioritize intersections for opportunities for these fluids to concentrate. So we're continuing to crunch all these structural pieces. All of this hole was oriented core, thousands of orientation structural measurements that we're processing presently.
So based on what this hole 12 cost, and maybe what adjustments you can make from what was learned by drilling this hole, with the money you have left, how many such deep holes can you drill before you need to raise more money?
Yeah, well, we are not fully funded in terms of reaching all 10. We began this program explaining that the first 4 holes were going to be step outs to the east of our current fences to add that data to make sure, largely to get the structural information to peg these intersections, confirm the model, and also give us opportunity to get lucky, while then being more selective in the latter number of holes. And so we're not fully funded for all 10, but certainly we're ready to push through that first phase and well into the second. And as we drill more of these 4,000 foot holes to the east, and it's good to point out that as we move back to the west, these holes are going to get shallower and cheaper. But right now we have a handle on the cost of what one of the holes was. That's not a great sample size. As we have a couple more holes under our belt at these depths, we'll be better prepared to budget exactly, how many feet, how many meters we think we've got on the shelf right now.
Now, suppose Mother Nature lifts her no gold for Wade curse, and you get lucky with number 13 and encounter a Cortez Hills breccia 1 ounce per ton interval, and it's down there at 1,000 meter depth. How far would you want to take the delineation drilling of these expensive holes before you entertain a farm-in offer from the likes of a Barrick, who can then carry you through the next $30–50 million needed to delineate a deep, high-grade Carlin type system?
The place we are right now in terms of understanding our geology, we're relatively advanced for a project of this stage undercover. And what that provides is the context to really understand what a discovery in hole 13 means. You can extrapolate a lot based on what we understand. And really the best thing that we can do, the highest value per dollar that we can do, is going out and finding another one of these. Any competent technical group will be able to take this model, that discovery intercept, and know what to do with it. So yes, we could continue to do it, but the fact that we are able as a company to find these types of projects in the half of the state where the rest of the industry doesn't really have a strategy to get started, we've got a strategy to find these types of things. We've demonstrated we've got a systematic workflow to advance these things to the point where we would have had a discovery. So really getting back to those aspects of the value chain are where we're going to be able to participate in more and more of these discoveries. So every drill hole after that is really something somebody else can do. It doesn't mean we won't, but in terms of when will we be open to entertaining those sorts of discussions, I think immediately after our first, potentially economic intercept.
Now, you guys homed in on the South Grass Valley play by starting at the northern end of Grass Valley, and you came up with a substantial golden groundwater anomaly, and you had McEwen Mining farm in and drill 1 hole, and it turned out to be unaltered upper plate rock, and you've done nothing really since with that area, but you ended up sampling the entire valley. In the middle of it seems to be barren of any values, and you now may have a major, almost North Carlin scale district in this area. What potential is there to revisit the North Grass Valley area? And in that big database you showed with your 6,000 sample locations in your presentation flyover, how many other such windows in your database are there where you might want to go in and poke a few holes in just to see if here there is an altered Carlin fluid pumped lower plate window that nobody had any clue existed? Yeah,
North Grass Valley is a equally prospective target and project is South Grass Valley, simply just not as advanced. And unquestionably, there's a challenge in the capital market to say we're going to drill 6 $500,000 stratigraphic orientation holes to now understand the geology of this place where we haven't seen a single gold number. And so those were the hurdles we had to overcome in order to fund South Grass Valley and continue to move it to where it is today. I would like to think that with any success here, and any more success in South Grass Valley, that our ability to fund those sorts of early, still expensive stratigraphic test holes to test for, do we indeed have the sort of architecture that we believe we might? Is there any reason to believe that the gold and groundwater we're seeing is associated with a large-scale mineral system with massive volumes of alteration, trace elements, and bedrock? Answering those fundamental questions with a handful of still expensive drill holes is a really important early stage of the project. And so, yeah, I expect our ability to fund that sort of stuff, not just at North Grass Valley, but at a number of other targets will be, facilitated. So, yeah, we have lots of places like that we'd like to look at. North Grass Valley is in a very good spot. It's very close to Cortez. The range front in the Toyabe range there has been mapped recently very well, and we can project a lot of what we can see there undercover. The challenge at North Grass Valley is, whereas at South Grass Valley, we had the lower plate units that we're looking for sticking out of the gravels, what we know from the McEwen hole is we need to expect that there's places where we're going to have to get through potentially a substantial amount of upper plate before we see the units we're looking for. So that's why we didn't start there. But yeah, the workflow that we've hammered out here at South Grass Valley, which is largely copying the workflow responsible for discovering Gold Rush and now 4 Mile, that same well-trodden path is exactly how we'd expect to now work to advance North Grass Valley.
Well, speaking of upper plate rocks, before you shifted to South Grass Valley, you put a lot of effort into bedrock mapping with your Scorpion rig, the Kelly Creek Basin area, which is upper plate. It's east of the upper plate hosted Lone Tree deposit. The Nevada Gold Mining joint venture just gave or traded that project to I-80, the spin out of Ewan Downey's Premier Gold with the Nevada assets. There is ore that's going to be underground mined beneath the old pit. There's infrastructure there. This group is turning this into the flagship. What implications does this have for the project, which the Kelly Creek Basin project, which is currently under farm out to another junior that's trying to go public? Is this good news for that project, whereas before it looked like it had to deliver standalone discovery, whereas now it can deliver something that could end up being part of the future Lone Tree revived operation?
Yeah, I think it's a big development for Nevada. The Kelly Creek Basin, while it sort of sits, it's a bigger area than any particular trend. It's a valley, a basin that's surrounded by 70 million ounces around the perimeter. And virtually every major, even majors that aren't in Nevada anymore, like BHP, every major you can name has controlled parts of Kelly Creek Basin in the past, recognizing the potential to find something undercover, but in the absence of a coherent strategy to look at the whole basin, mostly have just created relatively small islands of data. Now, Newmont shut Lone Tree down, I forget what year, 15 years ago or so, left 1 million ounces in the ground. But the whole part of the state, that whole sort of southern area of the basin, other than Silver Standard's operation at Marigold, has pretty much been dormant. The ground, because it's checkerboard, Newmont's controlled half of it. Barrick has a big private land piece in it. The ground's all mostly been tied up. Lone Tree, which is the only focus asset, has been parked. The whole area's kind of been forgotten. So taking Lone Tree off the shelf, making it a catalyst for revisiting that whole part of the state, I think is really important. And what we have at Kelly Creek is literally across the road. There is a lot of features that we know, and also Wade was instrumentally involved in discovering Lone Tree. So, having made a discovery on that side of the freeway where we could see the rocks, we're now undercover, we can't see the rocks. There's a lot of reasons why Kelly Creek, I expect the profile of Kelly Creek over the next few months to improve.
Well, it's good to see that Kelly Creek Basin is also something we should be watching going forward. This concludes our Backstage interview. Thank you, James, for participating in the September Virtual Metals Investor Forum.
Thank you kindly, John.